Today is October 3rd, 2019. My name is Jenny Matz, and it is my great pleasure to be interviewing Samantha B. for the Interviews and Oral History of Television in New York City.
Oh my God. We're going to do the entire history of television.
Yes, from the beginning.
Yep.
Hand puppets, live TV.
That's right.
Go.
Let's do it.
Okay, so, yes, don't be scared.
No.
We are going to start at the very beginning.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
I'm gonna...
Of you, which is...
Oh, I'm already taking a sip of my sugar drink.
What was your name at birth?
Oh, Samantha B is my birth name. Yeah. It's a really good name. It's like a television name, but from birth.
It is a good name.
It is a really good name.
And when and where were you born?
I was born October 25th, 1969 in Toronto, Canada.
And you grew up there as well?
I grew up in Toronto. I went to college in Montreal and Ottawa, and then I made my way back to Toronto.
And just briefly, tell us a bit about your childhood and what your family was like.
I grew up, I just have to remember my childhood. Hold on, I remember. My parents were really young when they had me. My parents met in high school, and my mom was actually in her final year of high school when she got knocked up with me. So, in an act of rebellion, my parents got married, even though everyone was like, do not, have the baby, but do not get married. And they were like, and they immediately got married, which ended in divorce. And so when my parents split up, they were still really, really young, and I ended up being taken care of by my maternal grandmother. So I was really raised with, mostly in the early years till I was about 8, with my maternal grandmother and my maternal great-grandmother. And then when I turned 8, my parents they fought for custody of me. And so I ended up moving in with my mom, but I was really spent so much time with my grandmother. She was the secretary of the Catholic school that I attended, so I saw her every day. She was a really huge factor in my life.
This is Doris?
Yes. She passed away in 1997, but I'm close with my parents. My mom lives on the west coast of Canada. My dad lives in Toronto. I see him all the time. My dad remarried. We're super close with my stepmom. So it's actually, and I'm an only child, BTW. I'm an only child. So I spent a lot of my youth hanging out with adults. Was a very adult child.
What were some of your interests growing up?
I read I read a ton, not because I needed to be an avid reader, actually just because I was bored and lonely all the time. My mom was a really big reader, and so I read a lot of really adult books. My parents were particularly my mom was she didn't really understand children or have any real interest in understanding the mind of a child. She was just like, no, just grow your brain up to match me, and then we can talk. So I kind of learned how to read with really adult books and themes that I truly didn't understand, but I did read a lot. I watched a lot of comedy.
What kind of shows did you watch?
I want to watch a lot of television because it was the 70s, and there was a hands-off approach to child rearing. You kind of had to take care of yourself. So I guess, what did I watch? I watched a ton of SCTV, just a ton. Because dinner time was TV time. So you would eat your dinner in front of a television. Children of the 70s understand exactly what I mean when I say this, but we really watched television constantly. So I feel in Canada, in Toronto, SCTV, it was either Carol Burnett came on at 6 or SCTV came on at 6, but it was dinner time, basically. It was I Love Lucy, SCTV, and Carol Burnett, and that was kind of the dinner hours. So I watched TV probably every single dinner for 5 to 10 years. And so I just knew those shows backwards and forwards.
And did you have any idea that you wanted to be a performer, that life might interest you?
No, I mean, I think that there was probably a little part of me that harbored an interest in being a performer, but it was not an achievable goal there was nobody in my family who was a performer. I went to Catholic school. It was not discouraged, but it just was not, I don't think that was in any, you couldn't even imagine it as a dream because it just seemed totally unachievable. So it was like, anyway, it's probably a Canadian trait, but I hardly ever wish for things that are completely unattainable. Like, I would never sit around and be like, well, I'd love to be an astronaut. I tend to not yearn for things that seem extremely impossible. So it's not like I was secretly harboring a desire to be a performer, but I was disappointed that I couldn't do it. I was just like, no, that's not for me. That doesn't seem possible.
Wasn't in the realm.
Not even in the realm, so it wasn't something that I super wished for.
So when you went to college, what did you study?
I went to college really in a way that was actually, well, I do wish that you could still go to college the way that I went to college, because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life at all. I thought, okay, my probable path is to get an arts degree and then apply to law school and go to law school. But I had the freedom to consider college an experimental time. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to take this time and take a bunch of classes that I've never really taken before, that I haven't really done. I was always a very good student. Even when I was a fucked up student, I was still a very good student. I'm still like Gold Star Catholic child. But in college, I kind of like let it all hang out. I was like, I'm going to take some math classes, and I'm going to take physics, and I'm going to take political science, and I just took a really wide range of classes that I truly failed at. Like, very bad. Political science was great. I actually enjoyed that tremendously. But I was not for calculus. But I thought, okay, I considered it to be, it took a lot away from that experience. It was good to be able to try something and not really care I wasn't like goal oriented in the sense of like getting great grades. I was like, I think it's more important for me to rule things out than for me to try to graduate at a certain level of degree.
So we're ruling out calculus,
really
right? Ruling out calculus. Did you take a theater class?
I did. I ended up taking, I can't remember what year of college I was in, second or third year of college, pretty far along in I was taking a degree in English literature. And I took a theater class because I thought it would be really easy, actually. I just thought, I'm going to nail this, and then it'll just be like a light thing that I'm just added to my repertoire. And I actually loved it. And it was I was at the University of Ottawa at the time. They had a wonderful theater program. Actually, they had a separate building. It was a really robust program. It's a bilingual school, so it was half in English and half in French. And it was great. I fell in love. I completely fell in love. It required that you do a lot of practical work, that you had to work in productions, and that could take any form that you wanted. So I ended up auditioning for a small role in one of the shows that they were doing with this guest director from Strasbourg. So it was like a big deal for everybody else, but I had no skin in the game. I was like, this is dumb. I love it. Who's this guy? Who cares? And I auditioned for a part. And I got a part, and I had to sing. I had to do all this stuff that was not super familiar to me, and I had absolutely no qualms about any of it. Not at all shy. Like, I'm like a shy person who is not at all shy on stage. It was a great experience. I knew nothing about theater, and I loved it.
Were you trying to get jobs as an actor?
I did after that. After that, I was really, I switched over mostly to the theater program, and it was terrific. And then I thought, okay, well, I'll do this. I thought, okay, well, this is finally, I'm like, I found it. I figured out what I wanted to do. I want to be a really serious theatrical actor. And I auditioned a lot, but I ended up moving back to Toronto. It's just more work there. And I enrolled in a conservatory-style acting program because I was like, I got to meet some people here. Like, I don't know this industry. I need to learn about it. I guess you need an agent. I knew nothing about it. So I thought, I'll come back to Toronto. I'll study acting, but I don't really need to learn it. I mean, like, you can learn the techniques in a practical sense. I was like, when I get hired for 1,000,000 jobs, I'll learn the skill of acting, but meanwhile, I need to learn how to get an agent. And so I attended that conservatory style program for 1.5 years, and then I quit because I was like, I'm too old for school. If I'm going to do it, I better do this. I better actually try it. And then I didn't get hired at all. That was it. I was doing so much, and everyone was like, you're very talented. And I was like, I am. And then no one hired me for just ages, like years. It was awful.
Did you have a plan B?
No, I did not give myself a plan B at all, which was smart because I would have taken that plan B for sure.
If you had an inkling it would be this difficult, you know?
If I had even a shred of, I would have given up many times over, but I just didn't. And people had urged me along the way to make a plan B, like, what about teaching? Like, I personally think of teaching as a calling. I don't think of it as a plan B. I don't think of it as a fallback. It's a career unto itself, and you have to want to do that. Otherwise, you will not be good at that, and the world needs good teachers who want to do the work. So I thought, okay, well, I guess I'll just waiter. I was waitering a lot. I was working. I had always had to work. So I was just working all these crazy jobs.
Yeah, I think in your book you were some kind of a penis
I worked at
inspector.
an erectile dysfunction clinic. I did a lot of children's theater. That really was, for a lot of people in Toronto, that really was like some serious bread and butter, doing touring children's productions, going to high schools. Oh, God. So I did that, but then I had a side hustle working at an erectile dysfunction clinic as an intake worker, literally as an intake worker, like listening to people's stories of penile dysfunction with a sympathetic ear, kind of channeling them to the right services. I know all about it. I know a lot about the human condition.
We'll do a
just
part
from
two.
that job. That's part two.
Part 2 interview of that. So trying for Shakespeare, not really happening.
Trying for Shakespeare, yes.
Question, so when did you realize that you had the ability to make people laugh?
Well, I think that I always had that. I actually think that was just a tool that was in my toolbox from childhood on. My dad's really funny. Humor was very important to me. I've never been a class clown. I'm not like loud. You would not know it from looking at the show. You would think that I walk into rooms and like really announce myself and make a big deal, but actually I was always just like the person writing super funny notes and trying to crack people up like all around me, but never the person who was taking the lead in something. I'm pretty reserved and quite shy. So I think I always knew that I own that. It was like, that was my thing. That was always my thing. That was like a way to make friends, a way to like deflect things, a way to kind of socially survive was my sense of humor for sure. So that was not, it was horrified to learn that the world did not see me in a serious way. Like I think I'm a pretty good stage actor, and I'm pretty good. I always thought I was. And then I would go to auditions for so many different things, and people would just be laughing. And I was like, why don't I understand? This is really serious. Like, I'm really trying hard. And the more I tried to be serious, the less it really didn't work. I think my face does too many weird things. I don't know. It feels really serious in my heart.
So how did you wind up doing sketch comedy? When's the first time you were on a stage doing sketch comedy?
Well, I had met, okay, I mean, is this too much? Am I getting too, is this too granular? Because
No.
I can get super granular. I was doing, first of all, I started dating my, Jason, who eventually became my husband. I started dating him. He did sketch comedy, which was, like at the time I met Jason, we were doing children's theater, and he was doing this side work in sketch comedy. So he was a part of a pretty successful troupe of comedians in Toronto. They put on shows all the time. They performed at a couple of venues in town that were very well known, the Rivoli and the Timpsons Playhouse. They performed really regularly. They were super funny. Until I met him, I really didn't know that world existed.
Was this the Bob Room? Is that what
The
they were
Bob
called?
Room, yeah. I mean, I knew there was Second City, and that was fine, but there was just a kind of, not an underground movement there was like a scene. There was a sketch comedy scene in Toronto, and I knew nothing about it. I went to see Jason perform. It was amazing. And through the world of children's theater, I had made friends doing other plays without Jason. I had made friends in that world. Some of those friends had a sketch comedy troupe. They were like, you should do sketch comedy. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to do that. I don't think that's for me. I don't even know how you begin to do that. Like, how do you even begin to, how do you just write things and then just go up on a stage and do them? That doesn't make any sense. It just didn't compute for me. But then in the troupe, which was called Catch 21, there was a woman, they had a female person. There was a woman in the troupe, and she got sick, or she was off doing some other gig, and they were like, can you just fill in for her? I think you'll really like it. You'll be really, really good at it. We need someone. We're doing a show at Timpson's. Like, please just fill in for a couple of shows. We're doing like 3 shows. And so I consented to do that. I thought, well, this will be an experiment. I did it, and like literally the moment, like from the first laugh standing on stage, I was like, oh my God, this is for me. I love this. How did I not know that this was absolutely perfect? So I worked with them for a while, and through that work, the Atomic Fireballs, which was an all-female troupe in town, they were looking to replace someone in their group. That was 3 other women, Alana Harkin, who is on the show, and then 2 other women, Fiona and Sarah Carter, who are still in Toronto. I'm just trying to remember exactly, but I believe that they asked me to come and audition for them. And I did. And I thought they were great, and we started working together, and then the love was real. Like, first of all, I love them as human beings, but we just worked like crazy. We just put shows on all the time. It was super do-it-yourself. We made our own posters and collected our props, and like we would build these nights of comedy and ask other comedians to join. It really was total labor of love. We all had side jobs doing other stuff, and we would just put on these comedy shows with almost no, it's not like we didn't have a goal for it, but I do, most comedy troupes' ultimate goal is like, let's get a television show, like get in the hall. And I think that is true to some extent. Very difficult. That's a very long-term goal, very difficult. I think truly we did it because we loved doing it and couldn't imagine not doing it. And I would sometimes think like, oh, no matter what job I'm doing, I will always do this. And that just opened a million doors. Doing something that I truly loved, that was extremely creative, for almost no purpose. Like, never, with no expectation, doing sketch comedy with no realistic expectation of ever getting paid for it, but just doing it truly because we loved doing it, I think just unlocked all of these doors. It seems so improbable. But really, if you find like the kernel of something that you love so much, it opens doors in very unexpected ways.
Like how for you?
Well, one of the cruelties of the acting industry is that the more you care about getting a job, the more desperate you seem. The more people know that you need this job and that you really want it, the less they want to hire you. There is like this super, it is just a cruelty that if they can sense on you that you need or want the job, they no longer want you. It's a little bit like if you have even an ounce of fame, everybody around you sort of wants you to act badly. Do you know what I mean? Like people would complain about you, but secretly they're like, they actually love the divas. Like they actually like love to have a story about how someone was a super bitch. It doesn't, you get, bad behavior gets rewarded in this industry, and desire goes unrewarded a lot of the time. So actually finding a focus for our creativity that was really heartfelt, I just became a more relaxed person. So I did my job, which really just paid the bills. I auditioned for stuff, and I really didn't care if I got the job or not because I was so busy doing something that I loved that I had very little time to think about how desperate I was for all these acting jobs. And so I started booking jobs. Oh, it's terrible. But I did. I started booking jobs because I would show up and just be like, what is this? I don't even know. Like, kind of unprepared, but instinctively on the right track, in the right outfit. And I just started doing a ton of commercial work.
So were you still hoping that the Shakespearean actress dream
that
was
sort
gonna...
of died. That sort
It
of
did.
went away. That it's not that, it's not that I wouldn't want that. I probably, not really. I don't want that anymore. But like at the time, I think I would have invited any work into my life. But really, the focus of my energy went to comedy.
What can you pinpoint what it was you loved so much? Was it the immediacy? What was it about being?
I think I think it was the kinship. I think it was the immediacy. I think it's really fun performing in front of a live audience. It's unpredictable. It's loud. There's just something. It's just something about people clapping that fills some deep need in the soul. But it's true. I mean, I can't explain it, but it's true. It means something. Yeah. I mean, it's terrible when it fails. It feels terrible. But for the most part, our audiences were so generous, and there's a reciprocity. Like there's a kind of a flow to it, and I come at it from the perspective of being in it and having it be a really shared experience. And I just happen to really like that, I just like it.
Yeah. So we'll skip you did a lot of TV roles and TV movies.
Not a lot of role. I did a ton of commercials. I made, my bread and butter was commercials. You know what I mean? It's just enough acting, but also a funny face does not hurt. And then the commercial work really dried up for me because I had done so many that I just was ruled out across a wide spectrum of types of merchandise. And then I got a job at an advertising agency. I actually got a job in the print shop of an advertising agency, a pretty big one. And I thought, I will retire from this business now. Jason was working a lot. We had gotten married. We bought a house. It was like the house that commercials built because he did a ton of commercials too. And when the work dried up for me, I just thought, I have no fight left in me. I'll continue doing comedy because I really love it. But now I'm going to focus and try to get a real job.
So you got a real job.
I did get a real job.
Talk about how in 2003, how did it come about that you became a correspondent on The Daily Show?
I had this job at the advertising agency, and just as I was kind of getting ready to cut my agent loose and just sort of put that part of me aside, The Daily Show had a pretty low success rate at getting female correspondents on the show.
I think 0.
No, it wasn't 0, but it wasn't like they didn't have lasting. There was a woman. I'm sorry. I'm going to blank. Her name's Rachel, and now I can't think of her last name. She had been working there for a while.
Rachel Axler?
Not Rachel. No. She was a writer. I'm going to blank. She's really nice, too.
We'll shout
really,
her
really like her.
Remember it. Mm-hmm.
There had been a few. But I think that she was getting ready to leave or something was happening and they were really specifically looking for a woman at the show, which I did not know at the time. But in their search for a woman, they came to Canada. They came to Toronto. They had heard all of these wonderful things about Second City. You know, it's in the pantheon of comedy history.
Greats, yeah.
So they came to Toronto. An agent had lured them to Toronto because he wanted them to look at his clients very specifically. And he didn't have that many female clients. He had maybe 3 or 4, just a handful. And he wanted to make it like a more filled out day for them because obviously his clients were going to get the job. But he didn't want it to seem like there were only 3 women in all of Toronto. So he got my agent at the time to kind of like round out the days so there were more people on the roster. And she called me and she was like, I don't know, there's an audition. It's on Saturday. It's for something called the John Daly Show with Stewart or something. I don't know it. And I knew it. Daily Show was my favorite show. Like it was my favorite show. It was Jason's favorite show. We loved it. We watched it every night for years. The moment that it came on the Comedy Network in Canada, it was appointment viewing for us, and it had been for years. So I knew immediately what it was. I got really excited. I thought, this is perfect. This will be, I was like, this is it. This is my swan song. This is how I end. I'm like, I'll do this final audition and I'll do it so well. I'll be like, I will put everything into this audition. And when I don't get the job, I will know that I gave it my all. And then I can walk away. And so I did. I honestly went into and it was their audition process for the Daily Show was ridiculous. It just was bore no resemblance to the actual job. It actually was the easiest audition process. It was really bad.
What did you have to do?
Bad. They just had you, all I got, I was like, God, what is this? So I was like, okay, I'm going to give it my all. This will be it. This is a great way to go out. I'm going to go out with a bang. I'm going to be like, I tried everything to make this career work. Could not do it. No problem. I'm going to go out with my head held high. I'll fire my agent. We're done. Super. I had such a positive attitude about it, actually. Because in Toronto, American shows would come in from time to time and see people, but no one ever really got hired. It was like, that's a really big pipe dream because just there's a lot of extra paperwork and we usually don't want to go through that. It was very, very, very rare. So I was like, what will this audition be? Like the type of work that you would see the correspondents do was so much out in the field and interacting with people. I was like, I cannot imagine what this will be. And in the end, it was just 2 scripts that Stephen had done. They just sent the script of something that I had seen. One was a Carell piece and one was a Stephen Colbert thing. Yeah. Both segments I had seen in recent weeks. One was about the SARS epidemic and one was about something else, and I can't think of it right now, but I was pretty familiar with it. I got the 2 scripts. I was like, what do I have to do? And they were like, you just read them. You're just going to read them to the producers. And I was like, oh my God, okay. That's easy.
Well, but was it? Because did you do it in their tone or your own tone?
I did it in their tone because I knew it. I mean, I really knew it. Mm-hmm. I truly, truly knew it. So they came to Toronto. They set up shop on a Saturday in some little space. I showed up. I immediately knew that I was the only person in the room who knew the show. because all the other women showed up in like costume. I mean, it just, I could tell. Like, I absolutely know the tone of this show. None of you watch the show, and you're not gonna get the job. Like, I'm not gonna get the job either, but at least I know the tone of the show, and I knew enough to wear a blazer. So I read the scripts. I did my best impression of Stephen Colbert and Steve Carell, because what else could I do? I just was like I just did it as seriously as I possibly could. Like, I cared about the material. And I heard nothing. I was like, that was great. I walked out. I was so proud. I was like, I wasn't even nervous. This was wonderful. And then 5 weeks later, I got a call for a callback, and then I had to come to New York. Like, that was mind-blowing in itself. Of course, I was dying. I had not spent a lot of time in New York. I had been only once before. And they wanted to fly me in the morning of and have me do it and then fly out the same day. And I was like, I think that's a bad idea for me. So I'm going to fly me in. I'm going to put myself up at a hotel. I'm going to stay the night. I'm going to go and see a taping. Just so I can, just for me, it feels so weird that I'm talking about myself so much. Is this normal?
This is why we're here.
I don't normally just talk about myself at this level. Okay. So for me as a performer, I like to see the space that I'm performing in. It just helps me. I don't love to walk out on a stage and be like, oh, I thought it was going to be 5 feet deep and it's 25 feet. I like to just know the dimensions of the place. So I asked if I could go and just see the taping of the show the night before. And I went, I flew in, I put myself up at a very grody hotel. I went to see the taping of the show. John Malkovich was the guest. I died of happiness. The whole thing was just like, it was astonishing. I came back the next morning. I was very prepared. I did the same pieces that they had me read, but I just did them in the studio with John. And I did a good job. I just did a good job because I guess I just wasn't nervous. I mean, I was nervous, but I was able to pretend that I wasn't nervous.
Low stakes, like you said. It was
pretty low. I mean, the highest possible stakes, but I was treating them like they were low stakes for my own personal comfort. I think a lot of the audition process that they would, I think a lot of the audition process was like, can you handle being in the same room as John without freaking out?
And that's another question. I mean, could you?
Yeah, for sure.
What were your first impressions of him?
He was lovely. Yeah, he was lovely. He was like extremely low key. I mean, I can put it all, I put the whole puzzle together after the fact. You know what I mean? Like at first when I met him, I was like, oh, he was dressed very casually, and he was like avuncular, totally friendly. We did it. It went by really fast. I don't know anything about it. I don't remember it at all. But then I walked out. You saw a lot of people that day. I walked out and everyone forgot that I was there, kind of. Like they forgot to take my mic off, and I was like, oh, I'm just alone in the building. Like they kind of had moved on to the next person without really dismantling me or sending me back out into the world. So I still had the mic pack on, and I was like, oh, where do I go? And then I went out into a stairwell. I just started wandering. So I was really shell-shocked. I took my stuff off, and as I got a little bit lost in the building, because it was kind of a labyrinth, I saw that there were closed-circuit televisions everywhere, and they were actually playing the auditions for everybody in the building. And I was like, thank God I didn't know that. Thank you. I did not know that. And I went out into the street by myself, and I went back to the airport, and I went home. I had my suitcase. And then they hired me. I think maybe a week later I got the call. I was at my advertising agency job, and my agent called me, and she was as stunned as I was. She was like, she was like, sit down. And I was like, what's happening? And then she told me, and I literally quit my job that moment. I walked into my boss's office, and I was like, hey, Patrick, I quit my job now. I quit. Sorry. And he took me out for a martini. He was so nice. He was so happy for me. And he took me, we went to like the Hyatt Hotel to the rooftop, and he bought me a martini, and I was stunned. And then a couple of weeks after that, I started, then we started doing paperwork, and that took a really long time. And then we moved we got an apartment. We had to come to New York. We had to get an apartment. It all happened really quickly after that. We had a house. Jason and I, we are pragmatic. We were both like, I was like, I'm going to get fired. And he was like, it's possible. It's probable. So we're not going to sell our house. Like, we'll get an apartment. We're going to see how this goes. Like, let's just keep it going, keep our financial plan going. You go there. I'm going to stay here. He was working. He had a job on a show. He was working a lot. And so it was like, go there. We'll get we get a studio apartment, just live there for 6 months, and then we'll reassess. So we moved me down on July 4th, 2003. He went back, and he stayed for like a week or something, and then he went back, and we just commuted. We just commuted for 6 or 8 months, and then he moved down maybe in January or something like that. And we made a go of it, and they never did fire me. They did not fire me, and then I worked there for 12, and then he started working there, which was incredible.
Can you remember the first assignment you got in 2003 and how
Yes.
you talk about that and how you knew what to do? I mean,
didn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. It was okay. So their audition process was very lean compared to the actual job, because really, like, there were studio segments, and they were very written and very kind of tightly. They were very locked down. There wasn't a lot of room for someone like me to be creatively expressive in the studio, and that was a different kind of. It was intimidating, and I don't think that I was as natural with that at first as the other stuff. The other stuff I felt really a lot more comfortable, a lot faster, but still not comfortable at first. The first assignment I had was, there was a guy, TSA had put out their no-fly list. And there was a guy on the no-fly list. He had the most banal name. Like, his name was like Dave Smith. I can't remember. His name was Dave something. I don't remember his last name, but it was like Dave Smith, and was on this TSA no-fly list. So this guy in Sioux Falls, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, was having so much trouble flying. And I mean, it was such a small story, but we were profiling this like dangerous man in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So we flew, it was like 3 flights to get to Sioux Falls. I just knew nothing about the job. It was like, this segment had been intended for Stephen Colbert or something like that. And he was like, by that time, I mean, he really had created the role of the correspondent on the show. That really was his. So he absolutely, and rightly so, got to pick and choose things, and was like, I am not going to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Like, I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to get on 3 flights. Why don't you let this one do it? And I was like, okay, I don't fly that much. So I went with a producer, and that producer was relatively new too, and he had been a 60 Minutes producer, super serious, not excited to be on the road with me whatsoever, because you're doing it right now. It's really a skill to interview someone and to listen and to engage in a conversation that feels natural on camera. It's something that you have to learn. It's not supernatural. You do have to learn how to do it. It's its own skill set. So I was truly terrible. I was really bad at it, because, it's like you're trying to accomplish so many things all at once. You're interacting with a real person who, like, is a 3-dimensional human being, not just a comedy prop. A lot of times people do function as comedy props in our faces, but they are real people with a life, and they bring their own history to it, so you cannot predict what they're going to say or how they're going to react to you. So you're not only kind of trying to make them calm in the situation and trying to like bring the best out of them, you're trying to have a conversation. You need to listen to the things they want to tell you so that you can follow them down a path. If you go down too far of a path, you have to bring them back to the subject at hand. And on top of all of that, we were putting jokes on it. We were adding jokes to that mix. So, and then not only do you go into these pieces very prepared with a kind of like a desired trajectory, a bunch of jokes you're going to try, and my head was really spinning, like your head spins because you're like, what's he saying? No, he's not saying what I want him to say. What's next on my list of things I got to do? And then I got to do a joke. So it was very stilted. And I had this 60 Minutes guy like yelling at me. So he's guiding, he's producing the segment, sort of yelling at me and trying to get me to listen. There was a lot of interaction between the two of us. It was terrible. It was terrible. And then part of one of the jokes that we did was that I would sneak a giant dildo through airport security at the Sioux Falls airport. So I had a giant... Anyways, so we bought a dildo that was this long and this thick and purple, and it just looked like it was like a gummy worm, but with 2 penis heads on either side. And I put it in my tote bag, and I was like, okay, we knew that it wouldn't get through in a suitcase. We wanted to really see it, so I hung it out of the back of my tote bag so that it was just like bouncing through the airport. And we were kind of filming it secretly because you can't just film in airports. So there were just like a lot of elements to this piece that were wildly intimidating. And that was my first story. I don't think it wasn't very funny. Ultimately, it wasn't a super successful piece. I look like I'm in physical and spiritual hell. I look like I'm doing an impression of, I want to say Morticia Adams. Like, I look so serious. I just look grim. Like, I am not having fun. But one of the things, if I may, one of the things that they liked about me and the reason they hired me at The Daily Show was because I looked like a reporter who was just busted. Do you know what I mean? Like, just like someone, and they told me that after. They were like, you seem like a reporter who's like, just been through stuff. You just seem like you've been through hell. And I'm like, well... I'll take it.
Well, on top of everything else you just listed that you have to go through in your mind to accomplish what your job is, you also had a persona, right, that you were developing. Or when did that come into play? When did you...
That is something, it's interesting because they kept, as I was starting the job, listen, it was a really well-oiled machine and they did 4 shows a week. So nobody really had time to hold my hand. It wasn't like the type of job where they were like, let me explain to you how this works. It was like, you're going here, this is what you're doing, bye, hope you get something funny. It really was like a self-starting place. There was zero, we bought our own outfits. There was no budget for wardrobe. I want to say for 10 of the 12 years that I was there, I paid for my own suits. Nobody was doing, I had to learn to do my own makeup. I did a terrible job. Like, there was no makeup artist. Like, we were not having, no one was doing our makeup. If you wanted makeup, you had to figure it out yourself. And that really was true for a lot of the time there. And so the suits that I wore were just like trash. Like, I went to, oh my God. I didn't know. I was really not a stylish person. I didn't know how to dress. They told me when I got hired that you have to buy your own suits. I was like, what the fuck is a suit? Like, who buys suits? What? I'm just this lady who... So I bought a brown suit. Like, literally bought a brown polyester suit. I'm not kidding. And then I bought others... Like, I had no money. We didn't get paid well. I wore the worst outfits, and I bought a pair of nun's shoes, like truly none like loafers. I just looked like shit for the first 5 years minimum, maybe 8. Anyway, I forgot the question.
It's okay. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
this when you said 60 Minutes producer, I
Yeah.
mean, were you trying to emulate a journalist
Yes,
in
absolutely.
the role? So
You're trying to be a journalist, and you're trying to do the work that a journalist does, but like not really. I mean, the
you
stories
weren't
that
a journalist.
No, not at all.
So
So it's like learning all the things that you would learn in J school, but the stories that we were doing were very light. So it's not like, the kind of work that we did in the later years of the Daily Show got a lot more. The stories got more and more intense as time progressed. But when I first started there, they were really dumb stories, like very light, like one building a whole 4-minute world around a really dumb joke. And we were all great with that. No problem. So it's like applying some techniques of journalism to a very dumb story, and that was just the joke of the thing. So, but honestly, learning how to listen to people is very difficult when you're trying to do your own thing. Like you're trying to achieve something and really hearing what another person has to say when you're trying to, knock things off of your own agenda is truly difficult. I'm sure you know that. I mean, it is difficult. It's just a thing.
But you must have at some point gotten good at it because people would
At some
reveal
point.
things to you
For sure.
that
At some
were
point,
kind of crazy. They were telling you.
At some point, I did get good at it, and I grew to really love it. I always feel nervous. I never don't feel nervous. I think actually that's very invigorating to feel nervous about things because people will take you down a road they will take you places that you never thought you would have to go. And so I try to approach, even to this day, every interview with that same kind of like, this could go in an unexpected direction. Like nothing is a given. There's no guarantee, which can give you nerves for sure. And you don't know what kind of personality you're going to be paired with. Like, who knows? I worked a lot with that guy, and his name is Jim Margolis, and he really is a great producer. He really is. And he is a great guy, and we became friends. It was rocky at first. He, I think, really didn't like me, but I really grew to love him, and he taught me a lot. I mean, times were different. He would yell at me in front of a full room full of people and be like, "No, you're not getting it." And I'd be like, "Jim!" Like we would fight in front of I don't know, 30 people probably. And that was just the way he had learned how to do it. That's the way I learned how to do it. It was really trial by fire. The stakes felt super high for us. I don't reflect on that with any, I don't like have a negative impression of that. It really did. I really learned a lot from it. I'm not sure that you could apply those same techniques today. That's probably a good thing.
Yes.
But that's how I learned to do it. I just got beaten up all the time. And I met really interesting people, and we really started to, we really developed a groove with each other, and we really started to have fun together. And he wasn't the only producer that I worked with, but I developed relationships with all the other producers, and that really became my world. And I did really love it. It was very adventurous. You never knew how good a piece was going to, you knew when a piece was going well, you knew when a piece was going poorly. I spent a ton of time in the edit suites. I was always in the edit, watching myself, learning from myself. It was not really required of me to be there. And it's been very painful to watch yourself in the edit. It's a terrible exercise. It's humiliating watching, just watching all your misses, watching all the opportunities that you missed for a joke, all of the ways your reaction could have been better, all of the things you could have done better, that also seeing your successes were less frequent than your failures. It's just lays you bare to sit in the edit TV is made perfect in the edit, and TV is a piece of shit before it reaches the edit suite. It is trash. Television lives or dies in the edit. So that was so instructive, and I'm so glad to have had that time, like 10 years of that, whatever it took, to just really to learn what is useless, to learn what to not waste time with.
And then you wound up with, you've talked about before, one of your favorite interviews was Ed Heaney.
Oh yeah, Ed
You talk
Heaney,
about,
incredible.
when you interview someone like that, do they know what the show is and that you're representing this comedy show, and they might look foolish? I mean, do they know that?
Yeah, they do. We never, at least for myself, and I don't speak for everybody at the Daily Show when I say this. I never wanted to misrepresent myself, actually. I always told people where we were from and that it was a comedy show on Comedy Central. And I was pretty upfront, and I would sort of tell them generally what the tone of the piece would be. I think, you had to keep some secrets from people, but it was never a secret where the piece was going to show or who the host of the show was. It just wasn't a well-known show at the time. When we would have homophobes on the show, they weren't familiar with it, and it didn't really matter to them. They were just so eager to have their point of view on television. People really want to be on television, so sometimes we would tell them where we were from, and they just weren't really hearing the nuance of what we were telling them. They really just were like, I'm only hearing I'm going to be on TV, right. Which was very useful for sure. As the show got better known, it became harder to book interview subjects, for sure. For sure.
Talk about Ed, though.
Ed Heaney was a guy in Broward County, Florida, who I can't exactly remember. He was fighting for some piece of legislation or something?
Well, he wanted to be a representative.
He wanted to be a state representative, and his agenda was that he wanted to stop the advancement of the homosexual agenda in Florida, because he coined the term homonasic. He was like, as I'm recalling, he was like, it's not like I don't hate gay people. I like gay people. I'm just homonasic. Like, they just make me sick. I don't hate them. They just make me physically ill because their agenda, I'm just seeing it everywhere I go. And as we got to the core of the story, we learned that what had actually happened was that he had a girlfriend who broke up with him and started a relationship with another woman. We were like, I can't imagine that happening. He's incredibly charming. We sat out in the hot Florida sun. He was an amazing character. And definitely it was myself and a female producer, Bronwyn Epstein, who's still a producer, and she's amazing. He and his friend, at the end of that interview, we caught them having a whole conversation about how they were going to have sex with us. They were conspiring, like the two of them were just like dividing us up. Like, they were like, I like the brown-haired one. I like the blonde one. Like, which one do you want? Like, maybe we could take one and like switch them out. It was like they had a whole plan for us for the post-taping. And we were like, thank you. I declined your invitation for a foursome in your hotel room in Broward County. And later, Ed was holed up in he ended up living in a weird hotel room, and he called Bronwyn frequently. And then the last time she heard from him, he was barricaded in his hotel room, and there were helicopters, and they were looking for him. So we don't know where Ed is now.
Oh, that sounds like a follow-up that has to happen.
I'm solid. I'm good. I think he's doing great.
No, I mean,
hope he's doing well. I do.
Is it the acting background that enables you to keep the straight face when someone says, I'm homonasic? I mean, how?
No, I actually think it's the Catholic background. No, I actually think it's like I'm very mission oriented. And I don't like to waste time. And I truly understood that my job was to bring back a funny piece, and that if I laughed, it would blow everything, and I have to do it again, and then it's not as good the second time. Just very, very mission centered. It's a waste of time to make yourself laugh. You're just wasting time. You're wasting everybody's time. Forget it. It's not worth it. You can suppress everything, laugh about it later.
What were some other favorite segments, or memorable segments that you did for The Daily Show?
I think in the early days, there are a couple of, I got to meet, these are really silly pieces, but they meant a lot to me. I did a piece with George Takei, and I did a piece about gay penguins at the Central Park Zoo that was another June Margolis special, but I really loved it. The story of Tango, the gay penguin, was very meaningful to me. It was a really funny piece too. Still, my attitude is very stiff. I'm but I do consider that piece to kind of be the piece where I felt like I did understand the job. It was, I think, doing the gay penguins piece was when the penny dropped for me, and that probably was a year in the making. It took a long time to the learning curve is long.
Did you pitch that piece?
No, I did not, but it meant a lot. It actually meant a lot to me, and I think that was, I think that's where things started to shift for me when I went, okay, I think I get it. It took about a year where I was very questioning, and then that was definitely the piece where I went, all right, I can do this. Okay.
What about it clicked for you? What was the solidifying change?
I think I just really handled a difficult interview subject well. I liked the content of the piece. I liked the message of the piece. It was also very funny. It was just a real convergence of just a lot of the things that we would do. Handling someone who I found to be reprehensible in an interview. That we interviewed a guy who was he was a pastor or some representative of some big anti-gay organization, and that was, we had to spend the whole day with him. And you can't spend the whole day with someone who you're about to interview and you're not going to get the best out of them unless you have to relate to them and somewhat, not relate to them, but you're just in a room together, and then there's a lunch break and you're just kind of together. And so processing that and being remotely respectful of his humanity in general while disagreeing with him on a myriad of topics, and also thinking that he was a very stupid and toxic individual, but still knowing that we had a mission to complete and I had to at least be civil along the way, was a good lesson. I just kind of learned how to handle difficult people in that moment. It's all a learning process. It's not like I nailed it and then I was easy peasy. It was a very hard job. Very, very difficult. Comedy is very difficult. In the best possible way. It's just very hard work. It's not hard work like digging trenches, but it still has a lot of challenges.
Steve Allen said, dying is easy, comedy is hard, or something like that?
Yeah, something like, again, I frame that differently from most jobs are hard. But it's just not fun and games. If that makes any sense.
Well, it always struck me watching you that there had to be some connection with the person, even though you were completely coming from different perspectives. So, did you ever learn anything from someone who had a completely opposite political or moral or ethical view from that surprised you?
Yes. It's not so much that I don't think that anybody ever changed my mind about anything. But I did learn to some extent that we just all bring a completely separate experience to it. When you're talking to someone in the interview chair, it's just the tip of this very immense iceberg and all of their life experiences and the way that they were raised and their education and the, just everything about them is just being distilled into this tiny moment. And so there is a depth of, it behooves you to try to understand where they're coming from somewhat. You don't have to like the person or anything, and they don't have to change your mind, but there is more to a person than just the shit they say.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I just learned a ton about, I think, human beings. I've learned about how to talk to people. I've certainly rarely got into fights with, I would argue with people, but it was generally speaking civil. There were only a few times when it got really ugly, and I like it that way.
So when and why did you leave The Daily Show?
I left because, I was there for I was there for a really long time, and I think that my husband and I, we actually shared an office. We had desks opposite each other. It was very cute, actually. And we knew that we wanted to take ownership of something. We just knew that the next step for us, because TV jobs are great, but when you get into this business, you don't have any expectation that you're going to have this job forever. Like, you're not going to be on The Daily Show for 50 years and then retire with a gold watch. Like, TV jobs have a shelf life, and we totally knew that. And we thought, okay. So the whole time that we were there, you end up, as a correspondent on that show, having a lot of kind of downtime. You're not used every day, even though there's 4 shows a week. There were times would go by where we weren't on the show for 4 weeks. Like, that's a lot of time. So in that open space, and it's friendly and it's fine, but you're sort of idle, and we're neither Jason nor myself, we're just not idle hands people. We like to do things and be active and be always thinking about what's the next step. So in that space, we raised a family, had 3 children, raised a family, you know what I mean? We're very attentive, full hands-on parents. And we wrote other projects, and we tried to plan what our next step would be, because we knew that it should have our names on it. Because that's logical. So we wrote a lot of television pilots. We would go out, we would go to Los Angeles and do pitch meetings. We just wanted to benefit from the doors that would open to us because we were on television. And we did. I think we made a meal of it. We sold a bunch of movie scripts, we sold a bunch of television pilots, and we were just sort of always working generally to the next goal. And with that in mind, we sold a pilot to TBS. We sold the pilot for The Detour to TBS, and you end up writing a lot of television pilots, and they don't get greenlit, so you don't actually get to, you sell the script, but it doesn't get made into like the pilot that is hopefully the thing that will sell the more episodes to the network. We'd sold the pilots, but we hadn't made the pilots. Like, we hadn't filmed them, which is like the next big step. And with The Detour, we really felt that we had something special, and we were like so hopeful that TBS would greenlight the filming of the pilot, and they did. So we filmed it in December of, I can't remember what year it was now. We filmed it in
2014.
I guess 2014. Yeah, that makes sense. Yes.
Because you left The Daily Show in April of 2015. So
April of 2015. So that makes sense. Then when did my show start? I don't remember. Oh, yeah, that totally. Okay. So December of 2014, they greenlit our pilot. We shot it in North Carolina, and we loved it so much. We had so much fun doing it. And we were like, this is it. This is our next step. If they greenlight the series, we will both leave The Daily Show, and we will go and make this scripted series, like 8 or 10 episodes of this script, and we'll move into the scripted space, and that is great because we're sick of news. And
were you burnt out on politics?
Not burnt out, but we didn't necessarily think that the next step for us would be news. We had focused our energy, like we were focusing our behind the scenes energy on unscripted stuff for sure. We had tried to sell people on a news-based pilot, definitely, and no one was really interested in those at the time, because anytime I tried to sell anything that was news-based, people would be like, we don't need that. We have John. We don't need another news comedy show. We have one. Like in the entire world, we have one, and that's John, and it's great. And so why bother? I guess Colbert was on the show, on the scene too, so they were like, "We're solid." There was no need to have a woman do it. We've got the gents. We're covered. So we shot the pilot. In January, we edited it, and then in February, John announced that he was leaving The Daily Show. And we had not gotten the green light from TBS yet, so we knew that he was going to leave at some point because he's
mortal.
done it for. He's a mortal human being. He doesn't want to do it for more than, I cannot believe that he did it for 17 years. But we knew that that day was coming. None of us knew when it was. You can prepare for something only so much. So we had like a week of pure panic where we're like, okay, how are we going to make a living? What do we do now? Because we knew that we would leave The Daily Show no matter what. We were like, we're out. So when he leaves, we're done. It's just a natural, it just felt like a natural end. You don't want to be like the person who, when someone new comes on, then you're just like the old snaggletooth that's like the old hanger-on from yesteryear. Like, we were like we'll fresh start it. We can jump out into the void. We are skilled. We will get work. Something will happen. It's still a leap of faith. And then about a week after he announced, I think I'm messing up the timeline a little bit, but TBS soon announced that they were in fact going to pick up the detour. And then they approached me about doing my own show as well. So it all happened all at once.
And did you have any inkling what that show would be, what the voice or the point of view would be?
No, not really. I mean, I kind of knew vaguely what I would want it to be. I knew, because the last years of The Daily Show, my point of view had really deepened with, with the encouragement of John for sure. And I knew that no matter what, it would have a very direct point of view. That's something that I knew that I would want to do. If I was doing a show like that, I would lean into that really hard or not do it at all. And so that part was crystal clear to me. And then we took a big pause and we wanted to move to Atlanta and filmed The Detour. We spent many months living in Atlanta shooting that. And then I came back early and started developing Full Frontal.
Just to put a button on The Daily Show, what were your biggest takeaways from that, and what did you learn from Jon Stewart about comedy?
I think that his work ethic is it's impeccable. He works very hard to make it look easy, and that is a big takeaway. I mean, that to me is generally the takeaway from any really amazing comedy endeavor that I ever see. You have to work so hard to make it look like you didn't work on it at all. There's a big group of people that go into making a comedy show happen. A lot of voices and a lot of thought and a lot of blood and sweat and fights and tears and a lot goes into a show like that to make it look like he just is just riffing. That was a great takeaway, and also to have as I just mentioned, to understand, to know about what a point of view is, really, to figure out how you feel about something and lean hard into that. And there was subject matter that John did not have an interest in exploring, or not that he didn't have an interest in exploring, but he didn't feel like he could speak with authority on that subject matter, and that I thought was good terrain for me, because I did feel like I could speak with authority on that subject matter. And it was just stuff that we didn't cover much. We didn't really cover reproductive rights on The Daily Show much, if at all.
Did you want to? Were you able to pitch any of those storylines?
Anytime that we did, it wasn't really, we didn't go very far with it, because you're distilling your point of view through someone else. You really, and when you're working on someone else's show, you're really working in the service of their point of view. And and so it's not so much that I was like, I wish we were doing this story and I wish we were doing it this way. It was more like, this is the point of view that we're focusing on right now. And I think that was completely fine.
You did get to interview the Sarah Palin supporters and try and get them to say the C word.
For sure. Yes, that was amazing.
Yeah.
That was great.
We're going to start talking about full frontal. Do you need to take a
Sure.
break or anything?
No,
Do you
I'm all
wanna-
set. I'll take a sip of my
All right.
go-go juice.